Episode G, Issues within the Book of Mormon. Beyond Joseph Smith's history as a seer using a peep stone and his trials in 1826 and 1830, the Book of Mormon reveals intriguing aspects regarding its context and geographical inconsistencies. Theological issues. The Book of Mormon narrates the story of Lehi, a so-called prophet who lived around 600 years before Jesus. Lehi is depicted as preaching repentance alongside Old Testament prophets like Jeremiah. However, there is no record of this Lehi in the Old Testament or any Judaic texts. Given that Lehi was supposedly a contemporary of Jeremiah and preaching in Israel, why is there no external evidence or record of his existence? Other Old Testament prophets from that era are documented, yet Lehi remains an anomaly. Lehi is said to have been commanded by God to leave Jerusalem and journey into the wilderness near the Red Sea with his family, 1 Nephi 2. Subsequently, Lehi's sons are instructed to return and bring others with them into the wilderness. After 5 years, Nephi, Lehi's third son, receives a vision and is placed in a leadership role over his older, discontented brothers, who were noted to be wealthy, 1 Nephi 1. A closer examination reveals striking parallels between Lehi's exodus and the biblical story of Moses. Moses was a prophet, as was Lehi. Moses was commanded to lead his people out of Egypt, while Lehi was directed to leave Israel. Moses spoke Egyptian, having been raised by the royal family, whereas Lehi supposedly brought reformed Egyptian with him. To clarify, there is no historical evidence of reformed Egyptian. Even if it existed, why would Israelites carry a foreign language rather than their native tongue? Moses led his people to the Red Sea to cross, while Lehi and his family also journeyed to a sea. Moses faced rebellion and complaints from his people, just as Lehi did from his family. These parallels suggest a deliberate mirroring of the Exodus story in the narrative of Lehi. The repetition of themes and details indicates a patterned approach rather than an independent account. Let's delve deeper into the contradictions present in the Book of Mormon. First, according to Jewish law as outlined in Deuteronomy 21:15-17, the firstborn son inherits his father's goods and titles. Given that Nephi was not the eldest son, his elevation to a leadership role over his brothers contradicts this law. The assertion that God chose Nephi over his brothers due to their murmuring is inconsistent with the pattern observed in biblical accounts, where prophets frequently faced rebuke and trials. Why would God suddenly prefer a prophet who is compliant and meek? Next, consider the episode where Lehi is supposedly instructed by God to return to Jerusalem to retrieve brass plates containing records of his ancestors and prophetic writings, 1 Nephi 4. The narrative describes how Nephi and his brothers seek these plates from Laban, who refuses to surrender them. After several failed attempts, God commands Nephi to kill Laban while he is intoxicated. This episode introduces the so-called Sword of Laban. Nephi is reluctant, but ultimately complies with the divine command to murder Laban. Several critical issues arise from this account. Contradiction with commandments. The God of the Old Testament explicitly commands against murder. Yet, in this narrative, God commands Nephi to commit murder. This inconsistency raises questions about the morality of a deity who would order such an act. The Book of Mormon's portrayal of this event, with Nephi being commanded to kill a drunken man, seems more like fiction than a divine directive. Manipulation and power. The story suggests that God orchestrated the circumstances to facilitate Laban's murder, raising questions about the necessity of using alcohol to subdue Laban. In contrast, the Old Testament depicts God demonstrating power through dramatic events, such as the thunder and plagues in Egypt during Moses' time. This discrepancy highlights a troubling theme in the Book of Mormon, where divine intervention is depicted in a less impressive and more morally ambiguous manner. These contradictions suggest a deeper issue within the narrative's portrayal of divine commands and their execution. Here's a point worth noting. Joseph Smith and Oliver Cowdery's fathers were both involved in the scrying schemes of the early 1800s. Methodist preacher Laban Clark played a crucial role in exposing the wood scrape frauds, earning the ire of Smith Sr. It's strikingly ironic, then, that the primary villain in the Book of Mormon is named Laban, a direct nod to the very adversary who opposed Smith Sr.'s interests. I want to highlight a significant issue with the Book of Mormon's use of the term Christ or Christos, a Greek word that attempts to translate the Hebrew term for Messiah, meaning anointed one or chosen one. This term does not appear in the Judaic Old Testament, so its presence in the Book of Mormon raises questions. After all, the characters in the Book of Mormon are purportedly Old Testament figures from Israel, correct? How could these individuals possibly know of Jesus as the Christ when, according to Paul, the full revelation of Christianity to both Jew and Gentile did not occur until after Jesus' death, Romans 16:25-26, Ephesians 3:3-7. Paul explicitly states that he, and not those before him, was the chosen messenger of Jesus' teachings. Yet, 2 Nephi in the Book of Mormon claims knowledge of Jesus Christ, making it the only pre-Pauline text that refers to Jesus by his New Testament name. This is perplexing, as the Greek word Christos was not used in the Old Testament and was foreign to Jewish traditions, which were distinct from the Greek and Roman worlds. It's worth noting that Paul's epistles are the earliest Christian writings, predating the Synoptic Gospels and the Gospel of John. This makes the Book of Mormon's pre-Pauline use of Christ even more problematic. The Book of Mormon claims that the church was established as early as 147 BCE, stating in Mosiah 18:17, and they were called the Church of God or the Church of Christ from that time forward. This assertion presents two critical issues. First, directly contradicts Jesus' declaration that his church would begin with Peter, who, by Jesus' death, was not nearly 189 years old, which would imply he lived well beyond 200 years. Additionally, it's noteworthy that the original name of the LDS Church was the Church of Christ, mirroring the name found in Mosiah. Second, the claim in Mosiah 18:17 is problematic because the followers of Jesus were not known as Christians until Acts 11:26, when they first received this name in Antioch. The term Christos was Greek, and it's highly improbable that a group purportedly leaving Jerusalem in a time when Greek influence was minimal would use this term. Yet the Nephites are depicted as using the term Christians as early as 73 BCE, according to Alma 46:15, which is anachronistic given the historical context. Roman and Egyptian languages would have been more plausible choices for a people not using Hebrew or Aramaic, the languages of the Jewish people. Reformed Egyptian, as described in the Book of Mormon, would lack a term for Messiah or Christos, as the Egyptian religion does not include this concept. Moreover, outside the LDS Church, no scholars acknowledge the existence of a Reformed Egyptian language. This indicates Smith's lack of formal education and his reliance on the Book of Acts. At the time, the Rosetta Stone had not yet been discovered or translated, so Smith was temporarily shielded from scrutiny. The Book of Mormon also introduces priests and high priests among the Nephites, starting with Nephi himself consecrating his brothers Jacob and Joseph, 2 Nephi 5 verse 26. This presents a significant issue with Judaic law. According to Alma 10:3, the Nephites and Lamanites are from the tribe of Manasseh, but only members of the tribe of Levi are authorized to serve as priests. Number 3, 9-10, 8, 6-26. Judaic law stipulates that only one high priest can serve at a time, Lev 21 verse 10. Thus, the Book of Mormon's priests lack any legitimate spiritual or legal authority. Furthermore, the concept of multiple temples among the Nephites contradicts the Judaic commandment of having only one temple at a time, the temple in Israel. It is implausible that the Old Testament God would alter this fundamental commandment for a distant group, especially when he punished those who were not Levites for mishandling the ark. Smith's inclusion of these elements appears to be an attempt to model his church on a supposed ancient Christian record. There's no shortage of angles to examine the Book of Mormon from, but one striking contradiction stands out: its condemnation of secret societies and rituals. The text repeatedly denounces secret organizations and forbids secret signs and tokens. See 1 Nephi 20:16, Nephi 9:9, 2 Nephi 28:9, Alma 37:22, 23, 25, 27, 29, 31, 27, Mormon 8:40, Ether 8:14-16, 18:22, Ether 11:22, Ether 14:8-10. Despite this, the LDS Church itself operates with secrecy. It has its own signs and tokens performed only within its temples, known exclusively to those who are temple endowed. Discussing these sacred rituals outside the temple is strictly forbidden and can lead to severe repercussions. I will delve into the details of these endowments in a separate book. Martin Harris, one of the Book of Mormon's early advocates, referred to it as the anti-Masonic Bible because it condemned signs and tokens that closely resembled those of the Freemasons. During the Jacksonian era, Freemasonry was a significant and contentious issue. Many influential leaders were Freemasons, and there was a strong network of Masonic favor. For instance, Oliver Cowdery, an early scribe for Joseph Smith, was involved in typesetting an anti-Masonic book before the author was murdered by Masons. President Andrew Jackson, himself a Freemason, nearly lost the presidency due to his Masonic ties, highlighting the controversy and significance of Freemasonry at the time. The Book of Mormon addresses various social issues relevant to Smith's era, and this is one of them. Ironically, Smith's father and brother, Hiram, were both Freemasons before the church's establishment. One of the fundamental tenets of the LDS faith is the belief that Adam and Eve's choice to eat the fruit of knowledge was a crucial part of a divine plan, granting humanity free will, 2 Nephi 2:23-25. This stands in stark contrast to the accounts in Genesis and Romans, which describe Adam and Eve's act as a rebellious transgression against God, resulting in their expulsion from Eden, Genesis 3:16-19, Romans 8:20-21. Nowhere in the Old or New Testament is there any indication of the Book of Mormon's version of the Garden of Eden. According to Mormon doctrine, Adam and Eve were aware that eating from the tree of knowledge was a necessary step to fulfill God's command to multiply and replenish the earth, a command not mentioned in the Old Testament, but borrowed from Kabbalistic Jewish mysticism. In reality, God's command to be fruitful and multiply came after Adam and Eve ate from the tree, not before. This makes it illogical for them to have known beforehand that they needed to eat the fruit in order to fulfill God's command. Joseph Smith, who incorporated many occult elements into his teachings, was known to wear a Jupiter talisman until his death. The Book of Mormon and LDS doctrines bear striking similarities to Kabbalistic and mystical Jewish teachings, suggesting that Smith may have drawn from these sources. It is noteworthy that Smith's great-uncle was a theologian and expert in Hebrew, which could have further influenced Smith's use of esoteric traditions in his writings. The Book of Mormon is riddled with inconsistencies, many of which I've explored in previous videos in this series. To avoid extending this video unnecessarily, I encourage you to check out those episodes for a deeper dive into these issues. Specifically, the videos on the Paleo-Indian Clovis First model and DNA evidence, the Heartland model, and the Mesoamerican model cover numerous additional problems. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. Thanks for watching. Please watch for future videos, and thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon informant signing off for the day.